Los Angeles.
Carl Sagan's book is titled Broca's Brain, in which, incidentally, you held Broca's brain in your hand, didn't you? A 19th century philosopher, scientist?
Broca was a student of the brain. He was the first guy to find a particular place in the brain which governed a particular kind of behavior. It's called, in fact, here it is. It's called Broca's area, and it has a lot to do with articulate speech. Well, I was in a museum in France being shown around by one of the officials of the museum, and came to a shelf which was filled with bottled brains. It's a little eerie. And I looked at the labels, and one of the brains had a label on it which said P. Broca. And there was Broca's own brain. And in fact, he'd established this whole collection, and when he died, his brain went into it. And so it got me thinking about questions like, might Broca's memories still be in there to be extracted by some later generation of neurophysiologists, and then the whole question of why do we feel squeamish about such things? So the question of the ethical aspects of the scientific endeavor flowed out of that, and that's why I call the book Broca's Brain.
You also say in your book that there's the biochemistry of hallucinogens, like marijuana, has at least a brotherhood in human anatomy?
Well, so 2 points. One is that there are small molecules in the brain which, for example, are natural painkillers. And during birth, both mother and child are loaded with those molecules in order to reduce the pain of the experience for both. And so the possibility that there are also natural hallucinogens which are produced by the body and produce states, for example, of religious ecstasy, is a reasonable idea. And the other point I was making there was, how is it that plants make molecules that human beings find fun? And
and what's in it for the plant to
What's in it for the plant? Why is the plant doing this?
Yeah,
they're not getting high on the marijuana. Well, I think the answer is it has to do with human beings cultivating crops. Human beings take special attention to plants that do nice things for them and ignore others. Time goes on, those plants which by accident make nice molecules are healthy, watered, taken care of, other molecules not. Human beings, I believe, over millions of years, have produced the plants which make the hallucinogenic molecules.
So if you're right, this is interesting. The consequences of your position are that somewhere down the line we're going to have a whole planet of grass, marijuana, and other goodies.
Again, there's a question of
isn't that your point? I'm not trying to be flip about it.
No, I mean, as human beings raise more hallucinogens, then those plants are growing in the place of other things like tobacco, and maybe it's a good trend.
You don't want to support. You don't want to support the consumption of tobacco, I don't think.
Well,
it's not good for you.
Exactly. It's the single most easily prevented source of death in the United States is smoking cigarettes.
But, okay, just to make sure we understand, the reason then much of the vegetation on the earth that thrives has to do with the decision made by man himself.
Plants are cultivated.
So we are introduced into the ecological architecture of this.
Exactly. We've made profound change. I mean, look at all the animals that we bump into in everyday life. Dogs, cats, cows.
They're there because of us.
Right. Those are not creatures that evolved by themselves in nature. Those are creatures created through artificial selection by human beings.
What'd you say about pigeons?
I didn't say anything about pigeons.
Yes, you did. Pigeons are in your book.
Oh, yeah, but not in this context. Yeah, pigeons turn out to... I forgot. Thanks for warning. Pigeons have a remarkable sensor for detecting magnetic fields, extremely small changes in magnetic fields. So it now looks at the way homing pigeons home is they don't look at the way the environment appears visually. They don't listen. They sense the magnetic fields of the environment. Oh, look, there are some high tension wires of telephones. I know where home is now because they sense the magnetic fields of gutters, railroads.
Man-made magnetic fields.
Man-made. That's right.
And
so in that sense,
which would explain the presence of pigeons in urban areas, because there's a lot of man-made.
They may like the magnetic signatures, but it certainly is true that before we had magnetic technology, there were still lots of pigeons finding their way home.
Okay, but the point here is that while we have ecologists saying, let us breathe and be a part of the ambience of the earth around us, let us be a part of it, You're really saying what we're doing, whether conscious or not, we are managing it, directing it, and not all of the managing is necessarily award-winning.
Exactly. A lot of it is unintelligent. I mean, another thing I talk about in Broca's brain is climate. We affect the climate. Every time we cut down a forest, we change how much sunlight is absorbed by the ground.
Yeah. Did you get to Chicago last winter?
Good point.
Do you suppose we are responsible for that?
It's not out of the question. It's not out of the question that some of the anomalous weather in urban areas is produced by the heat given off by those areas.
Carl Sagan, I'm sorry. They're upset. We'll be back in a moment.
On TV, the people who brought you some of the scariest movies ever made now bring to your TV screen for the first time Jaws. Call on TV and for $18.95 a month plus tax, get movies, sports, specials, and Jaws. Just when you thought it was safe to go into your living room. Honey, I love it. Coffee, it's so rich.
It's mild.
And it's rich.
It's mild.
Today there is MJB Premium Flake Ground, the deliciously rich coffee that's mild too. 100% Colombian coffee to taste deliciously rich and mild. MJB Premium Flake Ground.
It's rich and it's mild.
Staying in shape is part of my job. I'm Steve Garvey of the Dodgers.
But for me, Cindy Garvey, exercise and conditioning are a matter of choice.
And we think Jack LaLanne's European health spas are the right place to go. They have great exercise machines.
Steam rooms and saunas, whirlpools, and beautiful swimming pools in most locations.
Everything to help you look and help you feel your best.
You can join Jack LaLanne's for only $384 on a 24-month program. Call today. There's a spa near you.
I am stuck on Band-Aid brand called Band-Aid stuck on me.
Announcing an improved stay-on adhesive on Band-Aid brand adhesive bandages from Johnson & Johnson. You'll notice the difference because it stays on you better than anything else you can buy.
I am stuck on Band-Aid, 'cause Band-Aid stuck on me.
Mr. Sagan, I've heard, a lot of people have heard that since they've been sending satellites and different other things up into space, that our elements of the weather has changed so bad. And I was just wondering, is that anything to it? And what would the Voyager do onto our weather?
No, I don't think there's any evidence that sending satellites up has affected the weather. What happens is people say it's the worst weather in 20 years, but 20 years is a very short period of time. You go back hundreds of years and there's nothing anomalous about the weather right now.
Is there any astronomical lesson to Skylab other than we technically goofed, or that we...
The lesson is that if you don't give enough money to NASA, NASA can't do what it's otherwise able to do.
begging Mr. Sagan's pardon, American taxpayers are entitled to expect NASA to know what to do with the money that we're already providing them.
It's true, but Skylab is another one of those political rather than scientific programs being part of manned spaceflight, but the essential point is that NASA expected to be able to put another engine on there to be able to boost it into a higher orbit, and the funds were not available for that. Since the funds are available year by year, you can't plan ahead.
Right.
Do you see a system of travel where people on the West Coast might go up in a vehicle and wait for New York to come around and get off?
It's a very nice idea. It's tough to pull off.
New York would be late anyway. Yes.
Is it true that Pluto is just a core and I don't even know how it got into our system?
It used to be thought, is that we measured the mass of Pluto from how it tugs nearby planets, and we measured its size by seeing how big it seemed. Then you can calculate its density, and it seemed to be much too dense. It seemed to be a very funny thing. But now it turns out that the size of it is much bigger than we had previously thought. Maybe because it's something like a bowling ball illuminated by light, and you just see the reflection of the sun in it, and not the full size. With the present ideas of the size, it's a more ordinary object.
I'm interested in out-of-body experiences, and I wondered, as a scientist, have you had any out-of-body experiences yourself? Or?
Absolutely not.
No?
I enjoy being in my body a whole lot.
But you do speak to the, as you call it, pseudoscientist and the proliferation of this kind of thing in our time.
Yeah, in Broca's Brain, I spent a big section talking about how pseudoscience deflects us from the excitement and importance of science itself.
Were you consulted at all about Skylab?
No, nobody asked me a thing about it.
Yes.
You mentioned expense. What's the expense of this project?
Of the Voyager project, typical planetary projects are in the hundreds of millions of dollar range.
On the passing thought, a minute ago when you laughed about the plants that we could produce, as a mother of teenagers, do you, or as a parent, do you think that's a good idea to cultivate those kinds of plants, marijuana and such?
Well,
I don't.
I think it's important to remember that for all of human history, human beings have been cultivating it, so it's very much a part of being a human being. Of course, it can be misused and abused.
But also the important scientific point is that what we get here on Earth is what we want. And sometimes what we want is, the decision about what we want is made without regard to the long-term consequence.
That's absolutely right. Radiation is a good example of that.
The question I had was with the vast knowledge that's being obtained, through space travel and its engineering and your type of technology, can we expect in our lifetimes to experience some improvement in life as we know it exists in my lifetime or my child's lifetime?
I hope so.
I certainly hope so. Let me just do a quick response on that. My very deep feeling is that many of the problems which face us have nothing to do with science and technology. They have to do with politics and economics and can only be solved in on those levels. Other problems can only be solved in terms of science and technology. But if people don't understand science and technology, how can they make intelligent decisions about the use of science and technology? I think if more people, ordinary people, people in government, presidents, understood what science and technology was about and how to use it, then we would be able to usefully employ this tremendously powerful tool, which otherwise can be used equally for good as for evil.
Carl Sagan returns in a moment.
This is Mrs. Haley at Lincoln High. I'm afraid we're having some serious problems with Marvin.